really a great opportunity to talk through some teaching stuff. Thanks for everyone online for tuning in. And brief preface before I go into things, I've got a bunch of snot in my head that's sort of pushing on various parts of my brain. It might cause me to forget things. It might cause the speech to go a little loosey-goosey at times. So if that does happen, we'll just get to anything that I don't cover in the Q&A. I was asked to kind of start with a story about how I ended up using ePortfolios. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk through the initial course assignment for my English 207 class, which is health science writing. I'm going to talk about how that course assignment led me to a certain kind of course design for a face-to-face full semester session. Then I'm going to talk about how I had to adapt that for an online interim session, right? So I'll go through course design, then I'll talk about how I had to adapt that course design for the online interim format, and then we can talk a little bit about how I'm now in the process of adapting it for this spring semester online full semester 207 assignment. Okay, so let's go through that. Last fall, I taught English 207 health science writing for the first time. When I first started teaching at UWM here, my major teaching assignment was English 310, which is an upper level English course geared primarily towards engineering students, right? Which is on the face of things is kind of unusual because my background is in multi-ethnic American literature, although I do have composition teaching experience, right, and pedagogy training in that, which has proven very useful for all these kinds of courses. But in any event, last year I taught primarily 310, and then I was asked to teach 207 in the fall semester for the first time, right, health science writing. So of course, great, new course assignment, this is exciting. I immediately say yes, and then I'm also kind of immediately daunted by the challenge of thinking up this new course and trying to think through the needs of this new audience, this new student audience, right? As I look on pause and I see the majors, probably 75% of the majors for this course are kinesiology majors. And I don't even know what that means. I've never heard the word kinesiology before, so I know right off the bat that I'm going to have to do a lot of work for audience analysis to try and figure out who these students are and what they need from the course and how I can provide that through the structure of the course, through the readings, and also through the assignment structure. So I was talking to people who were familiar with the course previous to beginning it, and one of the more sort of salient points of advice that I received was to focus more on product than process. I'm going to explain that for a second, right? Because I've taught composition before, there's a sort of pedagogy called, a very famous pedagogy called process pedagogy, which is pretty typical. It's sort of built into the DNA of a lot of composition courses, and it was completely integral to the composition courses that I taught. Process pedagogy, like, it's a big, long academic history, but basically it entails focusing on the process of writing as opposed to emphasizing any final one document. So the way that works out in a writing course, like a composition course, freshman comp, is that students do a bunch of writing assignments throughout the semester, right? That might include kind of a summary assignment, analysis assignment, a writing synthesis assignment, research argument, right? A series of assignments that gradually integrate skills accumulated throughout the semester, and that includes all the drafts for the assignment, all the pre-writing materials, and so on and so forth, right? At the end of the semester, they take all that stuff and they put it in a portfolio, which they then hand to me, and that's their final assessment for the course. So when I'm sort of judging or grading or evaluating their work throughout the semester, I'm looking at the whole portfolio to try and get a comprehensive sense of whether or not they've sort of made improvements in their process, how they've progressed as writers throughout the semester, right? So it's not just about looking at that one final essay, it's putting that final essay in context with all the other materials to try and get a sense of that writer's journey throughout the semester. That is process pedagogy. I was told in this case we would be focusing more on product over process, meaning that this is a professional writing class. These students are going to be more interested in learning tangible skills, in writing certain kinds of concrete documents that will be expected of them in a workplace environment or elsewhere, right? So they're going to be much more focused on sort of pragmatic writing tasks, right? And maybe we want to de-emphasize or put less of a focus on the sort of like on the process journey, right? So I thought, okay, product-based, professional writing. Let's take a look and think through exactly what these students need in terms of final product. So The other thing to note here in terms of course assignment for the fall, first time teaching the class, this is a face-to-face traditional full semester course, right? So what I did is I did some audience analysis and I came up with some learning outcomes for the course. These are the learning outcomes from the syllabus. I asked them to analyze the social cultural dimensions of health fields, identify and employ genres typical to the health sciences, discriminate between strong and weak sources in research, apply sources to the construction of persuasive arguments, adapt these arguments to suit different kinds of audiences, different contexts, and different modes of media, and also develop professional identity, right? So in terms of writing class, some of these are not altogether surprising. We would want them, of course, to think broadly about the nature of their field and their specific sort of professional direction in that field. We want them to sort of understand how to do good research and how to make good arguments on the basis of that research, right? But in terms of like this product orientation, I also included things like number 6, developing professional identity, right? And I wanted to think about how we could use a series of assignments to build a sort of working, portfolio of materials that would be useful for them moving forward in the future, right, for their professional lives. And the way that I ended up structuring those assignments was actually pretty similar to what I did in my 310 class, the engineering class, right? That class is very dependent on group work, and that class is always also very dependent on scaffolded assignments. So there are very few one-off assignments in 310. Every assignment bleeds into the next assignment and provides some material or some methodology that can be adapted and used moving forward in the class. It's very, very dependent on group work, right? So there are individual assignments for annotated bibliographies and other things like this. But for the most part, the students form working groups early in the semester, and then all of the assignments that they do, whether they're judged individually or in small groups or for the full group, add some content or some orientation or perspective on a topic that their group is working through for the duration of the semester. So that's what I did for 207, right? For the face-to-face full semester thing. I said we're going to have a series of assignments here. They're going to work in different modalities. They're going to address different audiences, but they're going to be all concerned with a specific topic that is in the health sciences that relates in some way to your shared interests, right? And so this was the sort of assignment roster for that first 207 class, again, taking off the syllabus. First thing that we started off with was very product-based, what I call a job packet, just a collection of professional materials. I asked students to compose a memo directing attention to a student organization in the health sciences, sort of build some community on campus, also get them used to writing in the memo format, right? Very standard professional writing genre. I also had them do a cover letter, professional cover letter. So I had them identify a job in their field, which could be kind of aspirational, like after graduation, this is the kind of job that I found on Indeed or somewhere which I might apply for. And then I said, construct a cover letter that makes a persuasive case for your suitability to the job, right? Then I also had them compose a professional resume, and finally a statement of purpose. So if the intention for the student was to go on to graduate work, I also had them do a statement of purpose. So the idea here is that you have a packet of materials, and these are peer reviewed, these are assessed by me. Hopefully at the end of this, you have a job packet that you can pull out in your professional life somewhere down the road, and a cache of materials that you can adapt for different purposes, right? Whether it's applying for a job or a graduate program or whatever, right? So that was the first thing. Second thing I had them do was an annotated bibliography. So we're getting some research work done here, right? Working through peer-reviewed sources in the health sciences. I also had them do an audience analysis for their working group topic, wherein they tried to think through all the different kinds of audiences that are impacted by their chosen topic, and try to think through their various sort of interests and values and modes of communication as they relate to a health science issue of some kind. I had them do a podcast also, right? The idea here is that they are experts in the field and burgeoning experts based on the research that they've done in the course on a specific topic in that field, Now let's see if you can condense that information into a different kind of format that's meant for popular consumption. So I had them do a podcast of about 5 minutes as groups. We used the DH Audio Lab here for that. It was a very kind of fun, exciting assignment. Then I had them do a recommendation report, which is classic sort of professional writing, health science writing assignment. Again, that's making a recommendation based on research to a specific organization or institution or individual that asks them to make some kind of change on the basis of the research presented in the document. I also had them do a visualization, right? Taking the information from their research, putting it into another modality, right? So we got the podcast, we've got the formal modality of the recommendation report. Now let's try and translate that into a visual form that condenses that information and makes it very apparent. And then finally I had them do a TED Talk in class as a group where they, again, tried to sort of translate that material, adapt that material into a public-oriented speech in class, okay? So that's what we did. And it seemed to be going pretty well. This is my first time teaching the course. We're about halfway through the semester. I'm not really sure how it's going because, again, it's completely new, but it seems like it's going okay. And then I'm approached to teach 207 again for the winter, right? And of course I say yes. The reasoning there was that, okay, I'm teaching the course in the spring, I know. Maybe if I do the winter, it'll be a good sort of like soft launch for the spring course, especially because both the winter and the spring are going to be very different because they're both online, right? So I start thinking through exactly what needs to happen for the online course. And the biggest thing that had to go from my perspective was the group work, because I just didn't have enough time to think through how that would function online. I'm sure there's a way to make it happen, but again, we're coming up on winter pretty hard and fast at the end of the semester here. So I say to myself, how's this gonna work with the product orientation that I mentioned earlier, without that group component, right? And so I started to adapt things for the online environment. I kept the job packet, okay? So that's still happening. I did add one aspect to the job packet, which was a job interview. Basically, I put together a series of like standard interview questions. What's your biggest strength, greatest weakness, that kind of stuff. And I just had students compose and record themselves answering those questions and post them to a discussion board, and then they sort of commented on each other's performance there. So that was part of the job packet. Now, kept the annotated bibliography, kept the podcast, although that was adapted too. So instead of doing a sort of comprehensive 5-10 minute podcast, now I'm asking them to do 2 1-minute podcasts that take a really technical term in their field and explain it very crisply, cleanly in what I call a UW 1-minute clinic, right? That's meant to just explain to a general public what exactly is meant by a specific term or a specific process, right? As plainly as possible. They still did a recommendation report, scaled back to recognize the fact that this is one person working on it now as opposed to 5. And this spring I'll have them do a visualization at the TED Talk again. Didn't have them do that for the winterim. For the winterim, I had them do a series of discussion posts as well. And then finally the ePortfolio, right? Now I think we can sort of get into the rationale for the ePortfolio. I've been thinking pretty thoroughly about how to adapt the course for online, for an online environment. And I knew that I wanted to do something that integrated all these assignments in a way that was cohesive. I hate one-off assignments. I feel like every assignment should reappear in some way, should be readapted in some way. And so I'm sort of trying to think through how I can create an assignment that has students compile all their work for the semester into a final product that can provide a snapshot of where they're at the end of the semester, but also provide a sort of draft for future professional use, right? And so I'm thinking, and the first thing that I considered was like a professional website, right? Because that's pretty common now. Like a lot of people have professional websites or a professional web presence. I do, right? And I was thinking, okay, we could use something like WordPress, or we could use something like Wix. I think that's a pretty useful thing to have a professional website, and I don't know where else they would be asked to do that in college. I don't know what all if not in 207, I don't know where they would do it. So that seems to be a unique thing for my course that I could offer them, that they could actually get something out of the course moving forward. So I'm thinking WordPress, I'm thinking Wix. I'm not quite sure how that's going to work because where's the content going to come from? What exactly is going to be on the website? And so I'm kind of now, it's coming up on the winterim, right? I'm scrambling a little bit, and I'm just going through Canvas. Canvas is a new platform to me too, right? And I'm looking at all of its different features. I'm trying to think about how we can use the stuff that we all have access to on Canvas. And I stumble across ePortfolios. I was actually trying to figure out a way to add a picture to Canvas of myself. So you go to the account thing, and under the account thing, where you would add your picture, there's ePortfolios underneath it. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. I don't really know what that is, right? And I had no idea. I'd never heard of ePortfolios before, ever, right? And so I looked into it, and I thought, well, this is interesting, ePortfolio. What is an ePortfolio? I mean, look, I'm not an expert on ePortfolios. I don't know a lot about the academic sort of scholarship on ePortfolios, but I saw it and I thought, well, this is basically the portfolio that I used to do for composition courses, but it's kind of different because it's multimodal, because you can use different kinds of media in this ePortfolio, and you can make it public too, right? So instead of the student handing that portfolio just to me at the end of the semester, having me look at it and getting a sense of what they've done and where they're at, you could actually make this public in the way of a professional website, right? And that could be a really useful thing because basically I find that students work a lot harder at things when they understand that it's not just me that's going to be looking at their stuff, right? If there's a chance that other people in the wider world will look at their things, the bar tends to get raised a little bit in terms of student work. So I always like to do that if possible. So ePortfolio, okay, great. Where am I going to get the content for this, right? I want this to be a capstone for the semester, but that's kind of tough, especially in the rush days of the last especially for winterim. Winterim's 13 days total, right? So where are we going to get the content for this? I got to have them do a recommendation report and stuff like that, right? But how are we going to fit this in so that it's not rushed at the end of the semester? Where are we going to get the content from? Well, this is the content right here. I started thinking about the actual sort of components of a professional website. I looked at my own. Well, what do I have there? I've got an About Me section, right? That's our first discussion post, About Me, introducing yourself and your professional goals. I've got a CV on my professional website. That's in the job packet. I've got a resume, a sort of statement of purpose is part of that, right? A sort of longer sort of narrative description of where I'm at professionally and so on and so forth. That's on the professional website. That's part of the job packet. If I want to put research on my website, which I do, that's the recommendation report. What about sort of something that proves to potential employers that you have the ability to speak to different kinds of audiences? Put the podcasts on there. This is multimodal. It doesn't take a lot of work to put a link into an ePortfolio if the assignment's already done, right? And so what I did for the actual ePortfolio was I had them integrate all of this previous material, all these previous assignments, into the ePortfolio space, right? So that's the first thing, is that all the primary content for the ePortfolio is poached from the previous work that we did throughout the whole semester. So all the stuff that they've been doing all semester reappears, no one-off assignments, right? That's the first thing. The second thing I had them add for the ePortfolio was reflective information, right? Which is what you would do for a composition. Sorry, I'm weaving in and out of the camera here. I'm not trying to hide from online reflective information, right? So for a composition portfolio, you would have them include some, new content describing what they learned from given assignments and how it's going to help them in the future. I have them do that for this too, right? So for a recommendation report, you have a page for research or something like this, right? The prospective viewer goes to that page, and there's a write-up there saying, this is what I did for English 207, this is the recommendation report, this is the research that I did for it, this is why I chose this topic, this is what I think it does well, this is what I think I could do better in the future, this is what I'd like to work on in the future, right? So I like that reflective material because look, this is an undergraduate course, right? And so I think it's important if you're putting it out there sort of for public consumption that people understand it's a work in progress, right? It's a snapshot of work at a given point in time that suggests a student's interests and their sort of professional trajectory. And that reflective material really brings that home, I think, for both the student and anyone that's visiting the site. So that's what I did for the ePortfolio assignment. And we can take a look at some of those now. I also have a prompt for the assignment. I don't know exactly when or where we should look at exactly all this stuff. There's a syllabus, we can look at the actual prompt here before we go into the examples. So we've got due date, we've got percentage of grade, and sort of overview of the ePortfolio assignment, including some things that the students should consider putting into the actual ePortfolio, right? I didn't mandate that every single one of these things go in there, but I kind of did at the same time by putting them on the prompt, right? I also should mention too that since ePortfolios are pretty new to most people, I had them do some readings on the genre of ePortfolio, one or two sort of brief readings taken from other sources that were assigned for that week that just described what an ePortfolio is, what it does, and I also sort of linked to some examples from other institutions of ePortfolios. Some of those were done using Wix or WordPress, some of them were done using Canvas, and I also linked to instructional materials for how to actually do the ePortfolio in Canvas, right? So how do you actually like manage the technology? How do you actually create the thing? I linked to videos explaining that, and I provided help along the way, technical help on putting those things together. Okay, so that's the prompt, and let's take a look at exactly what we got here. I chose two examples with the student's permission. You can see here, this is sort of homepage, right? And Austin chose to put his sort of who am I thing on the very homepage. And you can see over here the sort of different sections of the ePortfolio. You've got professional goals, right? A lot of this is adapted from the discussion posts that we did throughout the semester. Professional philosophy, a lot of this is taken from the statement of purpose, which is then linked at the bottom here. You can get access to that document. Work experience is going to be the resume, right? Then you've got the research, which is the recommendation report, linked at the bottom here. All of this content up here is new. This is the reflective material, right? Public engagement is the podcasts. So you've got links to the two podcasts that Austin completed from the course. Education, reflection on the educational background, different kinds of affiliations. Austin chose to do the final memo here, the affiliation being the student organization that he wrote for the memo assignment. And then he took a lot of his posts from the discussion threads, and he put them here under professional blog, right? A lot of people have a professional blog of some kind that is oftentimes on their website, and he just made that blog from the class, right? He just took the stuff from the discussion post and put it in the class. Let's begin a conversation, contact information, great, right? He did a nice job choosing different kinds of images to make this look inviting and so on and so forth. And you can see that Ellen did much the same thing. There's a little bit of a difference here. You can see that sort of Austin organized things under pages on the right-hand side. Ellen chose to do it on the left-hand side. We'll work through some of that stuff when we start tinkering with the ePortfolios in a few minutes. But you can see a lot of the same information here, right? It's just, it's going to be organized slightly differently, student by student. But a lot of it sort of recurs in various ways. And that's kind of the goal of the assignment. The basic idea here, I think the innovation here, for me at least, is that you have an ePortfolio, right, sort of combined with a professional website. So if this course did anything, it sort of combined those two things into one thing. Because the ePortfolio option on Canvas can be made public. I didn't mandate that students do that for a variety of different reasons, but I asked them to if they wanted to share their portfolios with other students. Most of them did. And so when you have that public option enabled in Canvas, anybody can find that link if it's disseminated, right? So you have here, it's an ePortfolio on Canvas, but the way that it's structured, if you have that public link engaged, is basically a website, right? And so I kind of combined the process orientation of a typical sort of composition class and merged it with the product orientation of a professional website. And I think that's, I think it worked out really well, especially for interim, or winterim rather, right? I got a lot of really positive feedback on the ePortfolios to the extent that I'm absolutely doing it again this semester for the spring. It's completely new to me. I'm learning this stuff as I go. I didn't know what ePortfolios were a month ago. And I'm happy to talk about what's worked well for ePortfolios. I'm also happy to talk about any concerns that we might share about them. But I think maybe we move to the next stage here.
Yeah, well, let's do some questions.
Yeah.
There's some from that people have here or online as well.
Yeah,
So this is a semester's worth of work, is that right?
the winterim is
Oh,
supposed.
this is the winterim.
The winterim is supposed to be a semester's
Okay.
worth of work in 13 days. And I tried very hard to make it that. I think it basically was, yeah. Yeah,
I like this because I had an experiment, like years ago, I would have students create like a blog, and then I felt like, because then I felt like I was having them create an online identity when they weren't really ready for it, or, whatnot. So,
Yeah.
we had it private, but it was still on, a public account, so that's a nice sort of balance.
I think so. That's why I didn't mandate it be public, and that's why I ended up using Canvas instead of Wix or WordPress or something.
Right.
I had a student email me this semester, it's something I didn't even think about, where she said, they're doing peer reviews of resumes and stuff like that. And she asked, like, should I put my address on here on the resume? Should I put my phone number on the resume? And I said, I hadn't even thought about that, honestly. Look, I told her just make it up. I'm not gonna try and track you down or anything. But just, fulfill the sort of like, make it look like a resume and you're fine. But I think that the Canvas thing, the fact that it offers you that option of either keeping it private or activating as public is a nice compromise. Because I do take that to heart, the privacy concerns, especially when you're using personal information. Because even with the address or the phone number and stuff like that, like you can change that stuff pretty well. But like education history, work history, I could see how that might not be something people want to share, and I don't want to mandate that they share it if at all possible. Yeah.
When you say public, are you saying within the other class, or it's out there everywhere?
As I haven't searched, okay, so my understanding, maybe you can answer this. You want to take that?
Yeah, I don't
I
want to
could
cut
just
you off,
speculate, yeah.
but I can explain within
Yeah.
Canvas what they call a public ePortfolio and a private ePortfolio.
Yeah,
So if you make your ePortfolio public, then that means anyone who has the URL
right,
for your ePortfolio is going to be able to get to it and see it. I'm not sure that very many people would simply stumble across it without already knowing what that URL is. Because it starts out, with the instructor address, ePortfolio, and then the number for the ePortfolio.
yeah,
And so that way, I honestly haven't really explored that very much,
Right.
but I have found out, like, if they have that URL, then they can look at it, and they don't have to have a Canvas account or anything like that.
yes,
If your ePortfolio is private, then what you will see on the very first page is a link that you can use for sharing it.
Like who you want to share with.
Yes,
Okay.
but it's very important, even though Canvas calls, thank you, Lee.
So this is,
Yeah,
this is a private.
Yeah, so you can see right now where the cursor is, there's the link that you can copy and share to give others access to your private ePortfolio.
right,
I would urge students to, even though Canvas calls it private, think of it as a fundamentally public document.
yes,
And do not put anything in it that you're not willing to share in a public format. That's super, super important because once they share that link with anyone else, anyone who has that link can access their ePortfolio.
This link right here.
Yeah, yeah. And I've also discovered, you can share that link. You might be submitting it through a Canvas assignment if there's an ePortfolio assignment. But you could also email it to someone.
yeah,
And there is nothing to prevent someone who has that link from sharing it further with other people, and they could share it with other people. And once that link is out there, like it's out there, you can't then unshare it with people. And while you were speaking, Nate, I suddenly thought, if people want to share their ePortfolios, maybe in fact, it would be better for them to make it public, share the URL, and then the way to sort of, if you decide, no, I no longer want this public, you could make your ePortfolio private again.
Yeah.
So that actually just dawned on me as like, oh, that would be a way to share it, then unshare it. And
Yeah.
people could no longer access it once you've made it private again.
Yeah.
But either way, I think it's very important for students to understand what they are creating, whether it's public or private in Canvas parlance, they need to think of it fundamentally as a public document.
Yeah, completely.
And one other thing to note, that if you do make your ePortfolio public, then what you currently see, copy and share this link to give others access, that part disappears. So if students go ahead and make their ePortfolio public, and then you're asking them, okay, I want you to share this with me, give me the link, they're gonna say, well, what link? I don't have any link anymore. So in that case, they could share the URL. But again, just a thing to be clear about, so that your students know what to do.
Yeah, I think most of them probably, because what I did is I asked them if they felt comfortable, I asked them to share a link on the discussion thread so that other students could see what they've been up to. I'm guessing that most of them shared that link and didn't actually activate the public function. I'll have to go back and check that. And I also, so if they make it public, maybe neither of us have completely explored this, but is it possible that somebody would be able to find it just through Google searching?
I would need to spend some more
I
time
haven't tried to
seeing
do that,
if I can stumble across it. Like I
Right.
said, the URL, it's gonna start out with the instructor address and then
Right.
ePortfolio, and maybe I could just sort of play around with that and see whose ePortfolio can I stumble upon.
Yes,
if I
because I'm
try.
trying to remember, like I did a bunch of preparatory work on this and looking at examples of ePortfolios, and I think, some of them were in Canvas, but I don't know if I just stumbled across a live one, or if those were specifically used as examples, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
I'm not exactly sure, so it's worth,
Yeah.
worth asking those questions. I will say that the understanding that I gave to the students throughout the whole semester was that this would be public.
Yeah.
I'd like to err on that side because basically you can find most things online, and things live online for a long time if you put them there. And so I wanted to make sure that everyone kind of understood that this would be in some way public or semi-public.
Is there any other questions online, Kathy, or
I've been
anybody
looking, nothing yet.
else? I have one. What were some of the feedback you were getting from students?
They liked it a lot.
What
a
did
lot
they
of-
like about it?
Yeah,
Was there?
well, they usefulness, right? They said it was very useful. There's a tendency to appreciate, a lot of courses will have some kind of final reflection assignment. Maybe a lot of people leave that for the course evaluations. A lot of English courses at least will have you sort of write up a document, reflecting on your experience with the course. I think that's a really useful assignment, to sort of integrate a lot of the material that you've done. And students seem to respond to that for this particular, this fulfills the function of that reflective assignment. And I think that reflective assignment is really necessary to sort of take a step back and actually narrativize or make sense of all the work that you've done throughout the semester and make it a sort of product in and of itself, right? So a lot of, the descriptions of the ePortfolios tended to use the word useful or different or interesting, that kind of thing. But in terms of the comments for the class as a whole, you got these really nice sort of descriptions of a comprehensive class and things like that, that suggested that they were really thinking about the class in terms of a whole unit, that as opposed to, one assignment or something like this. Right?
Well, yeah, and especially like to be able to take an assignment and then reflect upon what you learned. So not
Yes.
just like, I'm doing the assignment, I've turned it in, I'm never gonna think about this topic again.
Yes.
But now I'm taking at the end of the semester thinking about more reflectively, what did I learn this semester? What were the main topics? What were the things that were going on? And have to synthesize that together.
Yes.
Seems to be a really interesting way of getting some reflection and some,
Yeah.
some summative, or some, formative learning using these different tools to kind of make it
Yeah,
work.
and I think a lot of, like, if you sort of emphasize throughout the semester that all this stuff is gonna recur in the ePortfolio, it pushes back on a tendency, the one and done tendency of students to just say, when we're done with this, I'm never gonna see it again. When I say, no, you're gonna see it again, it's gonna come back up, right? So, take some time with it, right? Because you're gonna see it again and you're gonna have to think about it again. It's not just gonna disappear, after the deadline is passed, right? It's gonna come back up at the end of the semester, and we're gonna have to think about it in terms of the overall course. Right? Absolutely.
That's a
question, are they allowed to edit it again?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Oh, so at the end of the semester, if they're not.
You know,
having-
I don't know how many people edited the actual documents. I would suspect that few did, given the nature of Winterim, like there's just not a lot of time to do that.
Right.
But they do have my comments on the recommendation report and so on and so forth. So I think for the spring, one of the things I'm gonna build into the rubric is, you know, a sort of ask that students do revise certain aspects of those documents as best as possible for the ePortfolio assignment. Yeah.
Speaking about that, I'm here today, just curious about ePortfolios, because I just learned about them a couple weeks
Yeah.
ago. Is it the kind of thing that, so they've made this, which I think is really so interesting and fabulous. So they can, for the future, let's say if they wanna edit something, or if they want something for their resume or a work product, they can pull that off and download it or
Yeah.
use it for something, that can be used that way?
That would be my hope,
Oh,
is that this would be a sort of rough draft for a future professional website on a different platform.
and so also with this, once they graduated, they still have this work product? That's my question.
I don't know the answer to that, yeah.
Yeah, what I have been told is that essentially students would continue to have access to this. They would, even after they graduate, like their ePanther ID is still associated with them. They would need to contact the help desk to have their password reset. But then at that point, like Canvas itself doesn't actually care if they're currently a student or not.
Is there a way to pull that out and put it something else,
So-
so that if they're creating something, I'm looking at the degree program that I had, you know, can they pull it out and then they have it?
So they can also download the ePortfolio as a zip file.
There you go.
Okay,
So they could
Right
hang
there at
on
the
to
bottom.
all of the materials that are in it. They would then
Wait, can you
want,
point that to that again?
like,
Thanks.
as a zip file, you know, it wouldn't have the same visual look, the organization of an ePortfolio. So they need, if they wanted something that looked the same, they'd need a platform in which to upload that.
But it would have the same documents.
Yeah.
And then for the reflective material, I mean, worst case scenario, they could cut and paste and do a new platform.
right.
It's possible to do.
Yeah.
And I think with this type of platform, and what you were thinking and what you were talking about as well, and then, I don't know what Sarah and I were talking about too, like, this is a really good first step into getting that online presence or getting like a professional website. This is a good first step to get you thinking about how what you do in the classroom actually has an impact on you long-term. Like, oh, what I'm learning about will have an effect on my career later on, or even my later academic development, and to be able to put that online and to have an online web presence, professional web presence. I think this is a great first step, and then using this as a zip packet, downloading the content and putting it on a Wix or a WordPress or a Squarespace or wherever you want to post it or host it online. So I think that's where I think it's a really great resource to use to then build further.
I hadn't even thought of that. I'm old school, you know, it's the semester portfolio, a big notebook, and
Yeah.
thinking ecologically now, and then also that my students don't think that way. That's why this is so kind of fascinating to me.
Well, the hope is that, you know, if you're in a sort of employment, or if you're a potential applicant for a job or for a graduate program of some kind, this series of assignments leading up to the ePortfolio would be really useful in terms of honing a specific interest within that field. If you're in kinesiology, maybe you're interested in a specific kind of rehabilitation technique or something like that. So it sort of forces you to think about the current conversations in the field surrounding that issue, which proves that you have the research interests and the technical expertise that employers might be looking for. But employers are also looking, by and large, they say, for good communication skills. So if you can sort of abut that material with these 1-minute podcasts, with a TED Talk, right? That to me, you know, if you can get people to visit those sites, it speaks a lot about the holistic set of skills that candidate brings to the table. That's the ideal scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah.